In this tutorial, I will show you how to create a simple bar graph in Excel using confidence intervals for the error bars. Here you'll see a Word document that shows step by step for what we need to do today. But also I'll show you a PowerPoint that has some slides that you'll be able to use specifically to make your graph into APA style. So I just want to show you a few slides here that talk about APA style, and then we'll go through SPSS to get some data from a tutorial data set, and then see how to create a bar graph from the data in SPSS with error bars, and then we'll do the same thing in Excel. So just to show you this PowerPoint, I won't go through all the slides, just talks about some different types of graphs and shows a few examples of APA style graphs. This is the specific slide you need to pause and use later in the tutorial to make your graph into APA style. I won't go through all the details, but you'll see here the yes column talks about grayscale colors. We don't really want too many colors in our graphs. Talks about the fonts that you should use when you are creating APA style graphs. And these are the appropriate fonts you can use, some type of sans serif font, so Arial or Calibri. And then about your axes titles, making them correctly bold or normal, depending on which ones they are. Lines and major tick lines, I'll show you all of this in Excel. We need error bars and a figure caption once you add it into Word. So today we might not get to that, but you know what you need to do there. You can use the APA style manual to 7th edition to look through everything that you'll need. And then in the no column here, we don't want a graph title. In Excel, you would actually add the graph title when you paste it into Word. You don't want grid lines in the background, which means grid lines might extend from your y-axis all the way across. We do not want that. We want it clean and white in the background. And we don't want a border line surrounding the full graph or even in this box here. What that means is when you paste the graph into Word for your final assignment, the white background of your graph would seamlessly flow into the page of your Word file. So there would not be any lines there. So this is what you need to refer to when I'm talking about APA style. Use it, check off the boxes so you know what you should and should not have there. And then the rest of the PowerPoint shows just some examples describing what was in that yes and no chart. So I won't go through this, but you can use these as examples. So this is what you should have. And then this next slide shows you what you need to remove. This last slide shows you some quick tips about what you might need to do in Excel or SPSS to get the kind of graph that we're looking for here. So here's an example of it as well. Now I'm going to move to SPSS and show you a sample data set that we're going to use while I go through a tutorial. So just to explain this data set to you, we have a variable here called background noise condition. There is a value of 1 or a value of 2. And then we have a variable called mean reading score. And there's every participant's score on the reading exam. So just to show you here, what happened is there was a group of students who took a reading exam, and we tried to figure out what the mean score would be depending on which group were they in. Were they in a group that had a loud background noise or quiet background noise when they took the exam? And so that's what our independent variable is. Which background noise condition were they in, and then which group, loud or quiet. That's what the 1 and 2 represent. And then we recorded their mean scores here, right? So that's what we have. What you would do is perform an independent t-test to determine the means for the reading score in the loud group versus the quiet group. And so we'd just assume our hypothesis might be that the students that took the reading exam in the loud condition would have a lower score, a lower average score than the students who took the reading exam in the quiet background noise condition. Perhaps assuming that when you have a quieter atmosphere, when you're taking an exam, you can better focus and not be distracted by the noise around you. So just to show you how you do an independent t-test analysis, you go up to analyze here, then you'd go to compare means and independent samples t-test. When you see, here are our variables, and we need to put in the test variable here, which would actually be our dependent variable, mean reading score. I didn't mention that earlier, but that's of course what it is. And then we need to group the variable based on the condition that they're in, right? And so if we click define groups there, click define groups, it would be group 1 was 1 and group 2 was 2, meaning 1 was loud and 2 was quiet, right? And then if you go into options, you could make sure that your confidence interval percentage was 95% or anything like that, estimating effect sizes, and you can click OK. When you click OK, your output, or you can click paste to paste your syntax. But when you click OK, you'd get your group statistics to see that indeed the mean reading score for the loud group was 27.28. Now, I'll tell you, the maximum score they were able to receive on the reading exam was 50 points. And so the mean for the loud group was 27.28 points. And the mean reading score for the quiet group was 41.4. So as we see here, the number of points that on average that the students received in the quiet group was higher than the average score that the students received in the loud group, which works for our hypothesis here. But of course, these are just the raw numbers here. Here's some more information for independent samples t-test if you would need to write up the results section for that. So I'm actually going to show you what we do need when creating a bar chart here is those means, like I just showed you for the two groups, but we also need the confidence intervals for each of the groups. So to do that, we go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Explore. And this is saved from when I previously did it, but just to show you, it's very similar. In your dependent list, you'd put the dependent variable, the mean reading score. And in your factor list, we're going to go by the two factors, either being group 1 or group 2, loud, quiet, right? And we'll also need to make sure that this little bubble is clicked here to say statistics, and click OK. So when you do that in your output, you will see this table called descriptives. And here, there's a lot more information, but what you need to focus on is where it says mean reading score, loud group, mean 27.28, which is what we saw before. And then down here, quiet, mean is 41.4. The other information you will need for this tutorial is the 95% confidence interval for this loud mean. And so you have your upper bound and your lower bound here, which means that the mean would actually be between 25.3827 and 29.1773 if you're using the confidence intervals, and the same respectively down here. So what I want to mention just about confidence intervals for a second, no need to look at the screen, but just listen. So if you recall in Psych 210, you usually use standard error of mean for the error bars that we'd use for our graphs. As you're advancing in your stats knowledge, we actually want to use the confidence interval for the mean in your error bars, which is more of a direct way to show the variability between the two groups. The variability means the uncertainty. So we have a mean of 27.28 for the loud group, but there's variability. if we do this test with a different population, our mean for the loud group probably isn't going to be 27.28. It might be a little bit above or a little bit below, just because there's variability in every group. So when you do this analysis and get the confidence interval for the mean, you'll actually see that they're saying if we test this study over and over and over again, 95% of the time, our mean will actually fall between 25.3827 and 29.1773 for the loud group here, right? So that's what it's showing. It's showing there's, 27.28 is right in between this upper and lower bound here. And so that's why we're going to use confidence intervals. It's a better way to show the variability rather than standard error of mean. Okay, so I'll show you a little bit more about that in just a second. But what we need to do now is to copy this table into an Excel document. So open a blank Excel document. Then when you're ready, come back to the output and right click and copy this table from SPSS output, go into an Excel document and then paste that whole table. And so it's everything we just saw here. Okay, so now what we need to do is actually recreate this table a little bit so that Excel knows how to make a graph. Let's go to this Word document real quick. If you can see, this Word document will show you step by step exactly what I've been talking about thus far. Let's see, I'll make sure that all of it shows up so you could pause at any time, steps 1 through 15. And so we already did a bunch of these steps. Now we're on here where we're going to recreate the table to look a little like this, just so that we don't have all that information from the SPSS table that we don't need. So as you're going through this tutorial, you can follow step by step through this, as well as use the PowerPoint yes or no checklist for APA style. Okay, so to recreate the table, I'm going to simply write condition here, and then our two conditions are the loud group and the quiet group. Maybe I'll go back up and say background noise condition, just to further specify, and I'll make that cell a little bit bigger. And then we need our means. And so if we look at the means for the loud group up here, loud mean, I'm just going to copy and paste the value into the cell here to make it a little better. And then the means for the quiet group would be right here, copy and paste. Okay, great. The other thing I wanted to copy and paste is actually the 95% confidence interval for the mean right here. And I'm actually going to merge these cells. Let's see. Home, merge and center. Because here I want to add my lower bound, and here I want to add my upper bound, just so I can see it a little bit better. And so the lower bound for the loud group, lower bound confidence interval will be here. And then my upper bound for the loud group would be here. Then I'll do the same thing, my lower bound for the quiet group here, and same for the upper bound quiet group here. Now, the last thing I want to do is put another column that we're going to work on, and it's called the error bounds. So what this means is that literally when you have a bar chart like this one, perhaps, we need to put error bars in here. And so how to do that is to find what our mean is, which is exactly what is stated, 27.28 right here. But then we need a bound to go above and a bound to go below the mean. And so that bar that's stretching up and down is going to essentially show 25.38 to 29.17. The only thing we need to do is actually find the difference between the actual mean and what is below and above these numbers. So we just need to do some subtraction. Basically, what we need to do, you can put a formula in here or use your calculator and type it in. I'm going to type in an equal sign to start a formula in Excel and say that for my loud group, I need to put a parentheses to start part of my formula as well. Click upper bound, the cell that has the 29.1773, minus the lower bound, which is the 25.38 in this case. Put another parentheses and then say divided by 2. So that's my formula. When I click enter, it's going to say 1.897. And what that means is literally 27.28. Below that, 1.89 below 27.28 is 25.38, right? And 1.89 above our mean is going to be 29.17. So what I mean to say is when we go here, right on our mean, we go 1.89 above and 1.89 below to give our error bars, and that will actually then show that the bar goes from 25, et cetera, to 29, okay? I'll continue to explain in just a second, but you can do the same formula for the quiet group, equals parentheses, upper bound minus lower bound, parentheses, divided by 2. That's the formula. Click enter. And now this is 1.74. And again, you can see that 1.74 below our mean of 41.4 equals 39.65. The same thing, 1.74 above 41.4 equals 43.14, which means in our quiet group, here's our 41.4 mean. And if we go above it by 1.74, and if we go below it by 1.74, we'd then end up with that bar stretching from 39.65 to 43.1. Okay, so that's what the error bounds mean. When we create a table, a graph in Excel here, we're going to need our means information and our error bound information. So the next thing we need to do is just highlight certain cells to make sure that Excel knows which data to use when creating a graph. So what you do next is highlight these cells that include the means for the groups as well as the labels for everything. Now you can create the graph in several ways. This little button here shows a quick analysis, which you can then click, choose charts, choose clustered column, and then it will show up here. This is what we need, but I'm going to delete this and show you another way. Make sure to highlight these again if they're not already highlighted. You can click insert. You can go to recommended charts and sort of do the same thing I showed you, or up here, you can hover over until it says insert column or bar chart. We'll click that and we actually click this 2D column chart. It brings us the same exact thing as that quick analysis did. So this is what we want here. Again, you can look, estimate. Our loud mean should say 27.28, which is right about there. Our quiet mean should be up at 41.4, which is right there. Now, what you would do in this case is go to our PowerPoint, and I'll go back a few slides to get to the yes or no. You'd make it grayscale, make it the right fonts if it's not all the way that way already, and all of that. I'll show you it in a second, but I want to focus on error bars right now. So in error bars, to format a chart, you can click on this green plus sign, which if you hover over, it says chart elements. Otherwise, especially if you're on a Mac, some things might look different. So try to look in these ribbons, and once you're clicking on the graph here, you'll be able to see chart design and format. And so you might have to click add chart element, which still has that green plus sign, perhaps. If Mac looks a little different, try the best you can, or you can contact me with questions. So once you click it, it gives you the same options as it does down here. So I want to go over here. And we want to check off the box error bars. Now, while I'm here, I'm going to check and uncheck the things that I do or do not need for APA style. So we do need axes. We do need axes titles. We don't want a chart title because we'll add that in Word. We don't want data labels or a data table. We do want those error bars. We don't want grid lines. And we don't need a legend or a trend line in this case. So we're good there. There are plenty of other things we need to add and fix, but I'll just focus on the error bars again. So currently you can see that there are some error bars. I just clicked on them, but you know, they are roughly equal above and below. They are equal above and below what this mean is here. And what's happened is that Excel has put in a standard value above and below for the error bar, but we want to actually specify our error bounds with the calculation that we just did here, which references confidence interval, right? Just so you know. Okay, so what we'll do here is have to edit it manually. And so you need to double click on the error bars and you'll see both of them are highlighted. Double click or go over here and maybe you'll need to click error bars and more error bar options here. But what you can do, once you're double clicked, you'll get a format error bars message here. And we want to make sure you're in the error bar options tab and you see this section down here, which allows you to click different options. Currently, it says standard error. And again, that's just something standard that's listed for Excel. We don't want that. We actually want to click custom. When you click custom, we'll specify value. And so when you specify value, there's a spot you can type it in. Make sure you delete all that out. It currently just has a 1 there. We want to delete all of it out. Go back to the positive error value. Now, what I meant by positive and negative is what I said before, where there's going to be a value above the mean, positive, and one below the mean, negative. What this is doing is going to actually change the error for the positive value above the loud and the quiet at the same time. That's why they're both highlighted here. It's because they're in the same data set. So what we need to do is either type in the values or you can toggle the cells. I'll show you type it in first. So the positive error value for the first bar, which is our loud, right? Our loud here is going to be 1.8973 here. So 1.8973. And that's going to be positive above our loud. Then you'll put a comma, space, and then you will type in the positive for the second bar, which is the quiet. So 1.7472. And again, the negatives are going to be the exact same for each bar respectively. So I'm just going to retype everything exactly as is. Comma, space, 1.7472. Okay, so you could click OK here, and then you'd be done. But just to show you one other thing, if I deleted everything out of here, I could go to the positive, click this toggle button, and then it would let me select those two. And then it says from the tutorial, E79 to E80, those cells are exactly what I selected there. And then I could do the same thing. And essentially what's that doing is taking the values of these two cells and implementing there, which is exactly what I did when I typed them in. So you could click OK. And so again, what this just did, I'll make this a little bigger so everybody can see it. But what this just did was create the error bar to correctly show the confidence interval for that mean, which is just about 1.89 above and 1.89 below for loud. And then again, this was 1.74 above and 1.74 below. So that's how you create the error bars in Excel, which is great. If we go back to that yes or no chart here. I will try to put this on the side. Let's see, and have Excel here just so we can see them both happen. And I'll show you a couple other things to make it into APA style. And again, you could go through the step-by-step Word file guide that I showed you earlier to help with that. So black and white grayscale, you want to really just click on the things you want to change, double click on them, or go up in the ribbons and say design, format, change things here. Try to do what you can. So here to the fill bucket of those two bars, when I double clicked on them, I want to fill them, not blue, but let's just say a gray. Oh, and I have to do the same for this one. Sometimes they do it at once, but there you go, gray. The border line is fine here, but just make sure you clicked fill or border depending on the one you need. Okay, so that's gray. Now our font is fine. We're going to the third one that says axes titles. They need to be bold and size 11 to 12. So our axes titles, this should say background noise condition because it's labeling what our independent variable was, background noise condition. It needs to be bold and 11 or 12 point font. I'm going to make it 12. And then the same thing here. This is going to be our dependent variable, which was mean reading score. And that needs to be bold and 12 point font. Oh, Control Z, Apple Z, I just messed up here. Okay. 12 point font. Great. There we go. And then the next one says the axes values need to be normal, which means not bold, not italicized, and 9 to 10 point font. So let's just double check. If it doesn't pop up right here, I'll go into home and see that it's not bolded or anything, and it's 9 or 10 point font, which is great. I just want to make it 10, so I'm going to do that. And then these values as well, go up here. There we go. Just stay consistent with whatever you do, right? 9 or 10 for both of these, and then 11 or 12 for both of these, but keep each category the same. Now we need to have solid black lines on our axes. And so to do that, you double click the values here, which includes this line for our x-axis. So I'll double click it and I still get that format chart area. Now, again, it's saying if we fill it, it's going to fill that box that was highlighted with a color. We don't want that. We want border, solid line, black. And now if we, oh, look at that. Unfortunately, what I just did was have my mouse clicked out here, and which made a black line go around the whole entire graph, which is actually exactly what we don't want. If you see in no, it says graph border line, no line surrounding the full graph. I apologize, I must have clicked outside of there by mistake. So I'll show you how to change it. Click over here in the empty space, go to border, no line, and then unclick border. And now you should see it's seamless. There's no light gray or black border at all. But what I needed to do was double click here, right, into my axis, my x-axis, and now it says format axis. That's what it should have said earlier. Line, solid line, black line. Unclick, and now you see that nice black line. Same thing for here. Solid line, black line. So there we go. Next, it should said major outside tick lines. So what that means is we want little tick marks that are extending on our intervals here so that we can sort of see, a little bit better where the values lie. So again, we need to click on that y-axis. It says format axis options. Go to the side here. It says axis options. Then click tick marks, major type, outside. And when you unclick, now you'll see they're outside the graph and they're major, which means they're on the intervals we have here. Minor would give you little lines right in between each one. We'll do the same here. You don't really need to because these are nominal variables, but I will do the same just because we have that there. And we already did our error bars, which is great. And then the figure caption would go into Word. excuse me. Graph title, we deleted that. We don't have grid lines anymore, and we don't have that graph border line. So basically this is in APA style, and you can copy and paste it into Word and use other APA guidelines or ask me how to make it fully correct when it's in Word. But for right now in Excel, this is what we need. So just one more thing before we're finished. I'm going to go back to SPSS and our output. One cool thing about SPSS, and you may have already done this, is that it can create charts for you. It just doesn't do it in very great APA style. So again, with the data set we were using, I'm going to go up to graphs, either in your output or in your, here, it doesn't matter either. Graphs, chart builder, click OK. And then in your chart builder, choose the bar graph, the style that you want. So in this case, we want this one. And then pull your variables into the correct spot. So on our y-axis, we want our dependent variable, which is the mean reading score. And on our x-axis, we want the background noise condition right here. And then it already knew that our two condition groups would be loud and quiet. So that's what we had here. Great. Okay. The last thing is if you go to element properties on the side, you want to check off the box that says display error bars. We're going to use the confidence intervals, which is the 95%. Now, again, sometimes you would use standard error for your error bars. One way to remember a little bit the difference, the confidence interval error bounds that you would use, right, that I was talking about above and below, are usually about 2 times the value of the standard error of mean that you would use. That's just something to remember. Maybe you remember it before, but here we are, confidence intervals 95%, and then you can change some of the chart appearance right now by maybe clicking, let's see, use custom color border and everything like that. And category 1, which is blue, the shading of the bars. Let's click this box here, which actually means no color. But actually, we don't want that. We want maybe like a gray color for grayscale, right? Okay, and there are some other things you can do later, but you can take out the grid lines so that it's the same thing. Those grid lines that went back and forth, you could toggle to see. We don't want those. So that's good for now. Maybe you can look at options, but pretty much we're good. You can paste or press OK. And when you do in your output, you have to wait a couple seconds, but then this graph comes up, which is, I'll show you side by side, but very similar to what we had in our Excel graph. But it has a title. So if you double click the graph, this chart editor will come up, and you can sometimes click on different things. And so I'm going to click on the title here and click delete. Make this a little bigger for you and click on this note about error bars. We don't want to actually see that in an APA style graph, really. You would put that information in the note. So let's see, I'll try to delete that. Everything else looks pretty good. And our confidence intervals are there. Yeah, the only thing is when you try to copy and paste this into a Word file, you'd still have this background here. So maybe you have to double click, on the actual chart. Let's see how we can click on the full chart. Maybe the border, we wouldn't want a border. So we'd click that. So again, you can play around with the chart editor, and when you click X, now your changes have been saved. This is what it looks like, which looks pretty APA, but we're trying to show you how to make it into APA style in Excel. So there you go, that's another option. One last thing I forgot in Excel is that on your y-axis, you need to make sure that it represents the full range of values that the score could have been for this dependent variable. For us, the lowest score they could have received on their reading exam is 0, and their highest is 50. So this y-axis does accurately represent the scale here. It does have a lot of decimal points. Again, it just depends on what the data we used. For my particular study, I would only have a reading score of with 2 decimal points. So you can, again, click on the y-axis, go to axis options, go to number, and instead of custom, which pulls the number from SPSS, we'll say number, and then it allows you to change the number of decimal places there. Okay, so when we click that and click X, it should change it to 2. There we go. Just make sure if you needed to, again, I'll double click on it, change the bounds for 0 to 50. So if it was only 0 to 45, we'd need to change that to 50. And then you can change the units here. So that's another option. That is all. Please let me know if you have questions about error bars, getting your confidence interval error bounds, and please go ahead and use the Word document step-by-step guide as well as the PowerPoint for help. Thank you so much.